This is the October meeting of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. My name is Kirk Shields. I'm the chairman of this board. We have, I guess, one action item here, approval of minutes. I think we have a quorum.
Yeah, we weren't able to get the minutes completed, so we'll continue that till the next meeting, so sorry.
We'll skip that item. Item 3 is citizen comment. Do we have any citizens that would like to comment? Okay. Welcome, sir. Would you like to come sit with us, please? You're no citizen. Welcome. Thank you for coming. The next item is consent agenda. Scott, would you like to take over right there?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
In your packet is a list of different reports, one for the Recreation Department, one for Parks Maintenance. There's nothing from the liaison, and then finally the Parks and Recreation Director. And I have them on the screen as well. I wasn't sure if anybody had any questions or if there's anything in particular that you wanted to point out. Paul Martin Jones Rec Center pool did reopen today, as we had mentioned that it would. Had an issue with the pool filter, and so hopefully that will be taken care of for the near to long-term future on that. One of the things that we've been trying to do is get our staff out into the community to talk about the different activities and things that we have and perform, and so we have a couple of events coming up that our staff will be providing activities for and disseminating information. And one of the things that we wanted to do also is let you know all the great things that happen over at Green Street Recreation Center. That's our senior center, and that's where we have a lot of different events going on, but some of these are the ones that are taking place in November. As far as park maintenance, again, it's been quite a busy month, and then of course after the rains this past weekend, it'll probably be a busier one for us for some cleanup, as well as some of the creeks. We've had some trees that the roots have come out, are showing, and so we'll have to do some work there in association with facility services. But we've worked pretty hard on some things over this past month. And then one thing to point out, getting into November, is we will have, on November 7th, we will have a veterans recognition ceremony out there. Actually, we're assisting with the Veterans Recognition Foundation. They're having a car show at 8 o'clock, and then the ceremony begins at 2. And so it's a dedication of all of the work that they have done over there over the past year, which is pretty extensive. So, athletic facilities, we spend a considerable amount of work. This is the time of year where we essentially prepare the facilities for next year, because getting into the fall season is the best time to be able to aerate, plant grass seed, and do those kind of things. And so we spent some time doing that, and we'll continue that into November. I mentioned there wasn't a liaison report, but we do have a Parks and Recreation Director report, and I wanted to wrap up kind of the finances of the previous fiscal year. As we all know, the fiscal year ended on September 30th, and I had given you guys a report about 3 months ago where we were up to that point. And now the fiscal year has ended, but it hasn't closed yet. There's still some expenses that will be booked back into last fiscal year, depending on when they come in. But all the services had to have been rendered last year in order for that to occur. So we have the 7 main items within the general fund. As far as the parks is concerned, we have 2 different items in the parks, 2 different divisions in the parks, in the general fund. One is the parks division and one is the recreation division. So the parks side of the operation, this is what's here. And you'll notice the second column says adjustment. When we started the fiscal year, Department 50 was the parks, and but it had a very limited focus. But there are other departments that did facility services and part of the spraying, and just all different kinds of functions are spread out. And so we had to do some adjustments to get it to what our operations are currently, so that's what those adjustments are. Some of them in this department added to what the Parks Department specifically does. So you come up with a final budget. And then on the right is where we ended the year to date on those expenditures.
So the adjustment is just a transfer from another department?
It's all within the general fund, but a different division.
Right,
So
not
it
an
was- it
additional
was-
appropriation?
Correct, correct. So we ended the year at $2.8 million in the general fund as far as the expenditures were concerned on the parks side of things, which is a little bit less than what we had been budgeted to be able to do. And then on the recreation side of thing, the main difference between the recreation side is we do have revenue generation from that aspect of it, but the same kind of thing on the expense side of things. So we had some adjustments. Some of the things were allocated there that now they're not, and so that's where that adjustment occurs. And again, on our expenditures, they came in a little bit under where we were on the final budget. As you'll note, on the revenue side of things, one of the things that would like to point out is swimming pool revenues. Last year in 2014, it was around 19,000. We had budgeted 19,500 and we ended up at 33,000. And that is due to, I know there's considerable discussion about the admission fees for our facilities. Both our revenue increased and our attendance increased at our swimming pools from 14 to 15. So that's one of those things where when Park Board did enact that and City Council did approve that fee, that variance in fee, it did not impact our operations as far as admissions were concerned. We actually had more this year than last year. And that's also, Jack Mann was open both years as well. So that's a good for us to see an additional revenue from that. Recreation fees, the main reason that is considerably higher than what we had budgeted is because in May we changed the memberships for Paula Martin Jones from the Longview Recreation Association fund to the general fund, and so that accounts for the main difference there. And then player fees. So again, we received more than what we had anticipated, but some of that was because of the way that we changed in our operations, and part of that is just the facilities had greater attendance.
Scott, just a minor question. Does the concession revenue go in the swimming pool for the concessions at those locations?
It does not. It goes into the Longview Recreation Association fund, which is here. And so I've tried to simplify this as much as possible. In each one of these there's a revenue line item, and then there are about, last year there were probably 6 to 10, sometimes 15 different line items in the expense side of each one of these individual areas. And so what I try to do is just say, look, we take a look at, as an example, flag football program. Here's what our revenues were, here's what our expenses were for that program overall. And so that's what we did throughout all of these. And so you had asked on concession stand. We actually have two different ones. One is this concession facility maintenance. This is the $4 per game that is played at our concession stands that our associations pay us to run those concession stands. And then the concession stands that we run ourselves is right here. So this is Hinsley, Longview Swim Center, Jack Mann Splash Pad. So that's that operation right there. So overall, this is one of the things I pointed out in my write-up about this. We generated $366,000 and spent $390,000. We did have a reserve there of about $100,000. And so, unfortunately, this is something we have to occur as we go forward, and that's why the budget reflects a positive balance. But we're going to have to really work hard on these programs to make sure that all of the revenues exceed the expenses for the year. So that's the report that I have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer on anything they have in there.
Board members, would y'all like to ask questions? I think I noticed on there that you had that the Lear soccer fence is going to commence in November, somewhere in there.
Yes, sir.
Where are y'all on that? Taking bids, or you're past that stage?
No, actually, we're receiving quotes right now, and so we have to, because of state law, we have to have 3 bids on that. We have 2 right now. We're waiting for 1 more and should have that back any day now. And so we should be able to to get that out here.
I cannot remember how much we put in the budget for that
We
expenditure.
budgeted $45,000 for that.
Very good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have a quick question. What is the nature study?
That
I
was
guess
the-
I was looking at that, and those things I could pretty much figure out what they were, but the nature study,
Arboretum.
okay.
Yeah, that was when the city had funds that were donated to it for specific things, and the Arboretum was one of those. And so there was a little bit of a carryover from year to year, and so when that, the bottom line show, like on this particular year, it shows a loss, if you will, of $11,000. Well, previously, there had been money that had been set aside for that, so. All right. We'll move on to the fiscal year presentation for 2016, 2017. And so one of the things that I think is really important, I think one of the things that you've noticed from me is that we need to have a plan. We need to have goals and objectives. And all of that is just kind of the way that I operate, but I think that based on the community really stepping up and wanting Parks and Recreation to be an emphasis for our community, I think it's important for us to make sure that we identify what those goals and objectives are, and they meet what we have in the comprehensive plan, because that's what the residents has said that they expect out of us. And so I think to achieve the level of success that they expect and what we want, we have to provide them for what that vision is and what that direction is. And so, this is kind of that presentation that kind of shows you where we're going with things for this year as well as into the future. So, when we take a look at it, we look at it from a lot of different ways. Overall, we have to have an overriding mission as to what is our purpose, what are we here for. And so our mission statement is here up on the screen, and there are two key words that I think are important as we look at this. And number one is quality, and the second one is efficient. And those are back to back on that top line, is we want to offer quality programs, but we have to be efficient in the way that we operate them. And so that's taking a look at all of our revenues, that's taking a look at our expenses, and making sure that we're doing things in line with standards as well as what our community is expecting from us. So that's kind of our overriding theme as to where we are going. This is what we want to do and provide. So that gives us our general guidance when we take a look at things. The comprehensive plan and the park master plan then identified these long-term goals for us. And these are the goals that are for this 5 to 10 years out. And they're based on the key areas that were in the park master plan. And so if you look at the park master plan, all of these are identified within that park master plan. And so this is where we have that overriding vision of where we want to go. This feeds into that, and then, we have to determine what our path is for this following year. And so based out of that, we have developed these goals that meet each one of those 5-year and 10-year goals, as well as meet our overall mission. And so we'll talk a little bit more about these towards the end. But the main thing, so in order to get here, we have to have the budget. And so when we take a look at the overall 2016 budget, it's broken up into several different areas, and so we'll go a little bit into that. I always like to talk about our parks department, and I'm a numbers guy. You guys have seen that. I like numbers. I think they tell a story, but I know not everybody is like me, and I guess maybe I'm unique in that way, but numbers tell a story, whereas for a lot of people, it's pictures that tell a story. So when I take a look at things, I'm seeing the numbers behind what we're doing. So we have over 50 plus ball fields that our staff is maintaining. And each one of those has to be mowed, they have to be aerated, overseed, lined, they have to be dragged. They have to do a lot of things with those ball fields in order to be in good playing condition. We also maintain over 12 miles of trails. And it's not as simple as just, oh, the trail's there and people can walk on it and it's fine. As you know, we're getting to that season where there are going to be a bunch of leaves on our trail. Well, we have to be able to maintain a safe surface for people to be able to walk on. And it's a little bit more of a challenge over on Cargo Long than it is on Borman, but that's based on the age of those facilities as well. So our staff has to inspect those, and maybe not every day, but they have to get out in there. It takes a while to inspect 12 miles of anything. We have over 33 different parks within our purview of what we do. We have lakes that are stocked with the help of Texas Parks and Wildlife. We have 21 different drinking fountains. And I think that's one of those things people are like, well, okay, you have drinking fountains that, you should. And we get a lot of complaints that we don't have enough. We understand that. But it takes time to get out to each one of those. And we don't have to maintain them on a daily basis, but we do in the winter. We have to winterize them, make sure that there's not any broken parts and pieces in those. And then, it's not like those water fountains are, right next to each other and conveniently located. They're typically in places that are hard to get to. So it takes time to be able to get out and repair a water fountain when it becomes an issue. And as you guys have done any type of repair on anything, how many times do you get there and you have every single piece and part that you need? Well, as much as we prepare, and our guys do a great job of assuming what's wrong, sometimes we have to go back and get other stuff. So it just shows you that, when we have 21 of those, it takes a little bit of time to get around and do that. We have 24 different playgrounds that we have to make sure that has a proper safety surface. We have to keep the graffiti off. Unfortunately, that's one of the issues that we have, not only here in Longview, but in many places. And we really stay on top of that aspect of our operations because I really feel that that's part of one of those things that it's like trash. You see trash and it just lends to more, and same thing with graffiti. If you see it there, then you're tend to get spotted a little bit more. So our staff has to take care of all of that. We have 23 bathrooms that need attention every single day, and often they receive attention more than one time a day. It's in the morning, the afternoon, and the evenings, because it's hard for us to realize sometimes, but we work from 7 to 4, some 8 to 3, 8 to 5. That's when people work. So when do people use our parks? Well, they use them before they go to work and after the work and on the weekends. And so we have to make sure that we keep those facilities maintained during those hours as well. And all of this is done with a staff of, we have 16 or 17 that are the ones that are doing the work. And this is a picture of, they were recognized by the Miracle League Board, and I think I passed that along to you guys about all the efforts that they have. And so it's nice to recognize them when we can. So the numbers tell me something, the pictures, tell other people things, and so it's good to have that difference. So here is our budget for this upcoming year, and we have an overall budget of about $1.3 million in staff, or $1.2 million in staff, because you combine this personnel cost as well as the payroll benefits. Payroll benefits are the insurance, retirement, and all those kind of things. So this personnel cost is the full-time salaries as well as overtime, and then part-time staff if we have them. You'll notice this is less than what we had budgeted for last year, but some of that is because of the reorganization, but then also some of this has been put into the sports or the hotel occupancy tax, some of the overtime budget some of the overtime that we spend on those tournaments, we're going to spend out of the hotel motel tax rather than out of the general fund costs, because truly those are expenses that are occurring because of sports tourism. Supplies are your fuel, garbage bags, cleaning supplies, those types of things. Land, maintenance, fertilizer, safety surface at playgrounds, trails. Maintenance of equipment is vehicles, fixing vehicles, irrigation, lighting, and as we know, out at Hinsley there was a light that fell, and that was about a $15,000 fix, but for that type of thing. And that doesn't occur often, but unfortunately it does. Contractual in there is dumpsters, our IT service. We have an internal service that does our internal staff that does IT, GIS. Insurance, liability, work comp, but then also our utility costs. That's all in that contractual right there. And then capital outlay. And as Mr. Shields asked about the Lear fence, That project is part of that $303,000, as well as a Gator and Aiken Park playground that we're going to actually have a little thing in December, I think, to talk about that with the neighborhood as to what they would like to see in that. And then $200,000 for the green. So those are the projects that are in there.
Scott, question for you.
Yes, sir.
For clarification, general fund budget, is that including parks and recreation, or one or the other?
This is just the park side of things.
Okay,
Just
thank
those
you.
operations that I talked about before. Yes, sir. So here's the recreation side of things. And so when we talk about recreation, and you see I don't have as many numbers on here. I'm trying to, get out of that a little bit, but I could throw numbers at you probably all day if you really wanted me to. But we do a lot of great things within the recreation side of things. And so this is a picture from our regional track meet, the Taft State Regional Track Meet, Green Street, all the different programs that occur within that facility. One of our most popular events that we do at Longview Swim Center is our Dog Days, which is at the end of the season. And this year we had over 40 dogs for that, and it lasted almost the entire time, which is good. Broughton Recreation Center, and that's a great facility, especially considering its location for after-school programming and activities, and our staff does a really good job of keeping them safe, as well as keeping their hands, their minds active during that after-school time. So when we talk about the budget for the recreation side of things, and I mentioned previously on the revenue, the swimming pool, we have to get all the budget done. Basically, we're working on the budget starting in April. And so, it's hard now. We see, we don't see our revenue until August. And so at that point, it's hard to be able to budget. So I would anticipate that our swimming pool budget next year would be more of a reflection on what we have seen. Recreation fees, this is higher than what it was, than the budget was for last year. So we have made that adjustment. And then, so overall, $228,000 are generated by use of facilities. That's the easiest way to remember and what is in the general fund versus what is in the Longview Recreation Association fund. The LRA fund is what we call it. That's our programs. That's programs and events. Everything is in there. The general fund side of things is use of facilities. So it's ball field reservations, pavilion reservations, all of those kinds, and memberships. That's kind of what it is there. Personnel cost, and one of the things that I don't think people realize how many staff that we have. We have 24 full-time staff that is administrative and does a lot of the programming stuff. But I don't know that people realize we have 117 part-time staff that work for us. And it takes quite a bit to manage that. And some people are like, wow, 117, how did you guys get that many? Well, concession stands and pools. You have to have at least two staff at the indoor facility year-round. But then when you talk about the swim center and Ingram pools, you have to have a tremendous number of staff to have, because when you have 15 and 16 on at one time, well, they can't work every single day. And so that numbers just add up on the number of people that we have employed there. So supplies, similar maintenance of equipment. Obviously, there's not a maintenance of land because all of that occurs within the park side of things, but there is equipment. Primarily, that is on the pool's side of things. Contractual is, again, some of the other costs that we have, the IT, GIS, those services that are provided for us. So that's the general fund side of the recreation aspect. And then here are the programs. And again, the intent of this is we have to have a positive bottom line between these two. We have to generate more here than what we do here. And as you'll note on some of these, not all of them, like adult softball, is budgeted to lose money, which puts a greater emphasis on, learn to swim, where we can make a little bit more money and save a little bit. So, that it's certainly one of the things we have to address from each individual program, but how it falls in the grand scheme of all of the programs that we do and offer. And we're working with staff to try to minimize this side of the equation and of course maximize this side. And nobody wants to raise fees, nobody likes to pay any more than what we need to. So we need to make sure that, again, that one of those key words that I used earlier is we're operating efficiently. We need to take a look at our expenses and make sure that we're using our resources to the best means that we possibly can. So that's, those are the parameters that we're working from. And I talked a little bit about the goals before. So I'll talk a little bit specifically, growing sports tourism. It's been an emphasis of the mayor, and I think a number of people have identified that as something that we can do. And so when we take a look at that comprehensive plan and how it fits into that, it's looking at the increasing funding, the maximum efficiency. But one of those is an item we have on the agenda tonight is the facility use guidelines. It's identifying everything that we're doing and how we're putting on both our leagues and our tournaments. And we need to make sure that document is solid for us to be able to operate those facilities as we move forward. Marketing our programs. This helps us engage citizens. We're doing a very good job on Facebook and Twitter of disseminating information. We have to get them to talk to us. And we have quite a bit of engagement on the Jackman Facebook page. They're very alert, they're very responsive, and so it's great to see those kind of things. And so we need to develop a plan how we're getting the message out on everything, and so it's done in a consistent manner, and the look and the feel of it is what we want to make sure that we're providing. Increase the number of programs by 10%, and right now, we only offer, about, if you count Learn to Swim as one program, about 20 to 25 programs. And so 10%, seems like a high number, but really it's 2 to 3 different programs. And that should be easy for us to attain. My goal, just so you know, is for us to offer 100 programs within a year. So.
And we have 25 now?
We have about 25. So.
What's your timeline on that?
I would say within the next 5 years.
Okay.
So when I was in Missouri, we grew our programs we had less than 100 when I started. When I left, we were offering over 1,000. So
What was
that's
your population?
20,000 people.
Okay.
So it's a little different. We had a facility to be able to allow us to do that there too. So that does go into one of our long-term goals is to look at our indoor recreational opportunities. So we need to work with partners on both our facilities and our programs, and we've proven that we can do that. Thrive 360 started last year at Paula Martin Jones, and there are a number of other partners that we can take a look at, both from a funding aspect, but then also from a facility standpoint, whether it's our schools. We have a very good relationship with the schools for the most part, and so we want to continue to utilize those facilities where we can, because then our costs are limited on that. We have developed a program worksheet, and we talk about efficiencies, and this is in talking about the programs that we run. All of our programs, the intent is for us to operate them at 20% of revenue over the direct expenses. So now all of our staff will have the ability to be able to take a look at, okay, how is this program doing in the infancy? When we're designing a program, I need to take into account all these things, rather than we get to the end of it and say, man, I spent a lot of money and we didn't make a whole lot on that program. So we need to take a look at it both before and after the program is run to make sure that we're reaching this. And that's the goal. And again, this is a goal. It's not, we know that can't occur on every one of our facilities, because we wouldn't be operating adult softball if that was the case. Well, we know we're going to offer adult softball. We have to be more efficient, though. And if our goal is 20%, if we can get that program to where it's paying its expenses, that's great. But it's going to take work on both sides of that to be able to get there. So those are the kind of the things that we're working on with our staff to make sure that we're identifying all of that. We also have to take a look at our rec center membership structure. Right now, we have about 20 different membership, at Paula Martin Jones. And, some people, as you know, it's like, I can get all these types of membership. I just want to come in and use it. It's too complicated. I'm done. And sometimes it's as simple as that. I just want to be a member. Well, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? I don't know. Never mind. And sometimes that's a response we get. So we need to simplify it and make it easier for people to be able to join our facilities and use our facilities. And Green Street is a very good example of that. So it's a lot of stuff that I covered there, and we have very high aspirations for this year. And within each of these, I'm very much a believer in goals and having SMART goals. And if you know the acronym of, whether it's measurable, it has to be sustainable, it has to be achievable, it has to be all those types of things. So we're starting to identify who is responsible for each one of these and a timeline for making sure that it's completed, or if it's not completed, we're making progress towards that. So,
I have a question.
yep, that's it.
These programs, is the programs initiated by a community member, or is it usually initiated by a city employee? Is that part of the structure when we're recruiting new programs to come about? Would that be part of getting new programs, getting it from community input, or hiring people, or finding the people that you already have employed, their gifts and talents in developing those programs?
It works both ways, and they're both very successful. We think from talking to people, we know some programs that they would like to see us offer. So now it's us identifying an instructor, a facility, and all those kind of things in order to be able to offer that program. So we do that quite a bit. But in places that I've been, we've had a number of people approach us and say, "Hey, could you guys teach this class?" And we're like, "Yeah, we need an instructor. Could you do that?" And they're like, "No." And we're like, "Well, we don't really have anybody else." And they're like, "Well, okay." And sometimes those are your most successful programs because they have a heart and they have an interest in that program. And that's something they really want to see succeed. And so they recruit their friends or people they don't know. And so we need to leverage both sides of that, because our staff has some really good ideas for some programs and events and things that they'd like to do. So they have to seek out people. But sometimes it's best when people just come to you and say, "Hey, I'd like to offer this program." And we're like, "All right, done. Let's find a place to do it." So there's success on both sides of that, and we encourage anybody to come to us that would be interested in offering any type of program. Well, I've never turned down a program because I think it's a silly idea. Because if somebody's asking us about offering a program, that means there's at least one person, and probably many, many more, that are interested in doing that. And so I think we need to take a look at offering it somehow, some way. And sometimes there are limitations. You can't find an instructor, or you can't find the space to be able to offer it. But I'm up for offering anything that somebody's interested in signing up for.
Okay.
So if somebody comes in with a program that they want to teach, the responsibility of the Parks or Recreation Department is to provide the facility and the utilities in that facility, and that's it?
It depends on the program. Sometimes, it depends on how it's going to be operated. If there are materials that are needed, what's passed on to the instructor, who's going to buy it, whether they're going to buy it, we're going to buy it. So whether it's a contractual class or where we bring them on as a part-time employee. So there's a lot of variables in how that occurs. But a lot of it is based on developing one of those worksheets as to what our costs are and what we can pass along. And some of that, as we're putting the program together is, in order to operate a program, you just know you have to have a minimum number of people, and there's kind of this ceiling as to what people are willing to pay for some types of services. There's just so much that you're going to pay for a class. So you have to figure out all those types of things.
Have you guys looked at the demographics on the current programs that are offered and seeing, is it more the retiree age? Is it more of the children's age, youth?
Definitely on the Learn to Swim, obviously, that's on the youth. Most of the other programs, I would say, are typically adult, though. So that's the presentation that I have. We're pretty excited. I think our staff is excited. They'll nod their heads now, yes, because I said that. But I think they're encouraged by having a goal and a mission and idea of where we want to go, not only this year, but in 5 years, but overall. And I've said to them on a number of occasions, I want us to be an accredited Parks and Recreation Department. I want us to win a gold medal. And in the Parks and Recreation profession, those are two things that give us some guidance into how we should operate. But it also demonstrates to our public that we're offering the best services available to them. And I think that's very important when you can do those kind of things. And so that's what we're building towards. It's going to take us a long time to get to those things, but there have been a number of cities in Texas that have won gold medals. Just this couple weeks ago, Plano won gold medal. Is the best Parks and Recreation Department in the country for population 150 to 300,000 And there's nothing to say that we can't in that category of 75 to 100,000, 150,000 people.
Scott, thank you for that report and also the presentation. You're very thorough, very impressive. And I know that the other board members share my feelings, and I appreciate the time and the care, it's obvious, that you put into this presentation. I thank you for that.
And we've shared this with all of our staff as well. So, you know, it's one thing to put everything together and then to not share it with anybody. And I think sometimes that occurs, you know, not just here, but a lot of different places. But we've shared that with all of our staff to make sure that they know that, you know, here's where we're going, here's what we want to do. And so I think it encourages them to be a part of it too. And I didn't just put all this stuff together by myself. I mean,
Sure.
It's a team of us. That
I know
does
it, and I mean to be more inclusive when
Yeah,
I make
no.
those comments about how the board feels about the work that y'all do, both in the preparation of these materials and just day to day. I did want to ask about that 20% revenue over direct expenses. Is that some sort of industry standard, or where does that come from?
Yeah, the most on programs, the industry standard is anywhere from, you know, depending on the program, but typically it's 10 to 30%. And on most of our contractual programs, we run it at a 70-30 split, where the instructor keeps 70%, we keep 30 of it. And so when taking a look at that 10 to 30, the middle ground is 20, so that's where we go.
All right. Y'all have any other questions about either the report or the presentation for the coming fiscal year? Again, thank you. I guess we'll move to item 6, field use guidelines. Is that one we had discussed at the last meeting or 2 meetings ago? We started talking about it anyway.
Yes, sir. I've tried to keep this on the tip of your mind, you know.
Right.
We've gone from 49 pages in this. We've gone from 49 pages down to 16.
Thank you.
And I think that has been very well received by the people. But one of the things that we want to make sure that we're doing, it's a process. You know, everything that we've put in here, you know, we've put thought and effort into it. It hasn't just, it's been from what you guys had done over the past year and a half. It's been from what we've seen at our facilities. It's been my experiences of where I've had things. And so I think we're on the 3rd version of it right now. And we're currently meeting with people. I just had a meeting this morning with Longview Boys Baseball Association. So we're getting the input from a lot of different users, and those are the associations and tournament directors that have hosted stuff here consistently. I mean, we'll get somebody that'll, you know, offer one a year. Well, you know, we're not necessarily seeking his input. He's going to have to put up with whatever we all come up with. But I want to make sure that whatever we end up with as a final product, that everybody understands that it's been an inclusive process, and it's not done that, you know, just out of you know, this is what Scott and this is what the Parks Department wants to do. There's a reason behind every single thing that we've put in here, and I can defend it. And but also, we want to make sure that we're listening. We want to develop relationships and partnerships with all those that use our facilities. And so it's not just you know, any type of relationship that you have with anybody, there's give and take. We know that, and we understand that. And so that's been one of the things is I've put in, certainly probably at this side of things, more that what we favor. But we know there's some things we're going to have to back off on. But that's how a relationship works. And so that's kind of where we are. We've put together this. We'd like to get approval from the Park Board at the next meeting. And so there'll be an additional draft that'll come out. So if you have any comments on anything, please share those with me. And I've made, in my meetings, as you can see, this is my copy. I've made notes and I've highlighted stuff to take a look at. So, I've already had probably 5 or 6 different things that as I talk to them about, they're like, you know, what about this? And we'll talk about it and think about it, and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense to change that. And so we're already doing that as part of it. But we'd like the Park Board to approve it in November, City Council to approve it in December, and then for it to go into effect in January. Really, what it all comes down to, it's all about money. And we all know that that's what it's always about. And so here's one of the reasons why this is important for us. And I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but this is what occurred this past year. And so softball, we keep track of everything down to the penny. And so softball, what we put into our softball leagues this year is approximately $30,000. That's the amount of materials and all that kind of stuff, as well as the staff time. And the fees that were generated off that was $3,600, which is a net return of 12.5%. Now, we know this is not going to be a 20% above revenues. We understand that, and so that we're never going to get that. We don't expect that. But I don't know where that should be. I don't know where this number should be. I know our feeling is we're putting a lot into it and not getting a whole lot in return. Now, we know that whatever fee that we charge the association, they're going to pass on to the end user, and so there is that consideration. You can see softball and baseball are much more expensive for us to be able to do than soccer and football, and it's very simple. Softball and baseball are played 3 and 4 days a week, and soccer and football are 1 day a week.
Scott, do you know how those percentages stack up against other municipalities?
Most are anywhere between 25 and 60%. So our fee that we've had for ours has been around since 2005. It has not increased since 2005. It was implemented in 2005, and so we have kept it the same. And so there's a good and bad to everything, and so this is what we generate off of that. When we take a look at tournaments, so this is a typical tournament that would be run at Lear softball 1 to 8. We spend $3,600 approximately in operating that tournament. In direct revenue, that what we receive if somebody just rents our fields is approximately $1,600. So the city, the residents as a whole, are having to cover that other 56% of that. Now, we know that some of that is because of economic impact. We know it's going to be sales tax that are generated through food and beverage at places and shopping, and we know some of it's going to be hotel and motel tax. But our department overall has never been directly funded by those mechanisms. It's part of the general fund, which is on the sales tax side of things, but we don't receive any, oh, you're going to get X percent to operate your department overall. So this is just a kind of typically if you were to run a tournament, it's about what we would get back in return on softball. Baseball, that's just like Lear 1 to 4, what our cost and what our return would be on a 2-day tournament, and then soccer.
Can we stop you a minute?
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, do you have a question?
Oh, it just dawned on me, if you go back a slide, I was going to make a comment that if you think about how professional sports business model has progressed over the years, that baseball was one of the first leagues that was introduced, and it was during the time of radio technology, so they had so many games. And if you look at the revenues from football versus baseball, it's very much similar to this, because the more games you play, the more expenses you have. Mm-hmm. But from a participation standpoint, I think the goal of the city is to increase participation. Right. And so I think sometimes we have to look at these and say, softball is played 3 to 4 times a week, and that is, part of the sport and part of the participation. We could move it to like football or soccer, where it's only played on the weekends, but that's not the purpose of, what we're doing. So that's the only comment I was going to make.
Excellent point.
Scott, while we're back on this slide, is the kickball league included in any of these categories?
No, that will be a program that we run, that our intent then is to operate at 20% above its expenses.
Okay.
So this is just primarily youth.
Okay.
And again, I'm not saying any of this is right or wrong.
But do you anticipate in the new guidelines then, for instance, increasing the fees in softball and baseball? Is that where you're going with that?
Yes, sir. It's to assist us, and the challenge that we have is that we are expected to do more within our park system overall. And people want us to do more on the trails. They want us to do more in playgrounds and all those kind of things. And we have a limited staff to do that. And those things do not generate any additional dollars. This can generate some, But if you're, at some point it's going to get to, you only have X number of dollars to spend on staff. What are you going to spend them on? And you need to do more. Well, I can't do more because I have to spend a certain amount of money right here doing this. And so it's the balance of, when you take a look at everything that our staff is expected to do, we have to balance all that out.
I just hate to see us increase the fees that might discourage use, because that's the whole point.
Right.
In my view, is quality of life. Because if you compare these expenditures to what is the city budget, Keith? 100 million? 160. Okay, I'm sorry, 160 million. This wouldn't even show up as like a pinpoint.
Right.
If we didn't even collect any revenue. You know what I mean, as far as expenditure.
Absolutely.
And so I appreciate what you're trying to do in trying to match revenue with expenses. It makes sense. But at the same time, the board members may or may not agree with me. I just want to make sure we focus really hard on quality of life and not,
Yes.
Exclude anybody or any demographic just because of some fee.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. And we're very sensitive to that. And if you'll notice in the facility use guidelines, in order for you to be a nonprofit and operate these types of programs, you are required to have offer scholarships. And so that's part of that is we do recognize that. And if we do increase our fees to the association, well, then they're just going to pass that fee along. We know
Absolutely.
that's going to occur. And I know that's kind of the point you're making.
Sure.
And so, it's the balance of everything, and it's tough to. I know in our budget meetings that there's only so many dollars that they can allocate towards Parks and Recreation,
Right.
and it may not be over a whole lot compared to the overall city budget, but it's important to us and how we allocate our time and our resources.
We agree, and I think in my view, you're fortunate in that the citizens in this city have shown that they are really supportive of parks, and
Yes.
so people are on your side.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win.
We're trying. So that just kind of gives you an idea of what is occurring. And like I said, I don't know that this is right or wrong. I don't know where it's need to be. If somebody just says, your goal is to make you have 15%, we'll make the numbers work.
Right.
It doesn't matter to me. I just need to have an idea so that we know how to schedule our staff and how to put the resources there. That's kind of what it comes down to me. I don't know what the right and wrong of it is. I know what the standards and all that kind of are, and that's what I can share for you. On tournaments, it gets into be a little bit different because it is talking about, that sports tourism model of the hotel and the hotel tax that can generate additional dollars. And so there's a little bit of difference there and using those dollars there. So in taking a look at it, one of the things that we've looked at is the fee for football, soccer, baseball, and softball has been the same, $5. Well, in soccer and football would argue that there definitely needs to be a difference between the fees that are charged for each of those, and I find it hard to argue against that, considering what we spend on it. So what we have proposed to look at is just that, a difference between soccer and football versus softball and baseball.
Mm-hmm.
I've put on there $7 for soccer and football, but if we're happy with 65% like what we are, $5 would be okay. Again, our cost is about $35 on the baseball, softball side of things, and so to charge that is unreasonable, and we will never get there. I know and understand that. It's not a starter. But tripling a fee also is probably, in some people's mind, a non-starter as well. So, I don't, like I said, I don't know where we need to be. I just have a sense and a feel that we need to be higher than what we are.
Yeah, and I think that you say tripling it, but still only $15. That
I-
still seems within the purview of reasonableness.
Right, and but it only does generate an additional $10,000 or $12,000, and so it's tough to look at all that.
Mm-hmm.
So. One of the things, and then is taking a look at more of the tournament side of things, is what those costs are, and so lights are a big issue for a lot of our tournament folks because we charge to use lights, and so what we have put in there is we've increased that day fee from 100 to 160, but we've included 3 hours of lights. And so really, in essence, if they were to use 3 hours of lights, their fee would go down for running a tournament. So we've taken a look at that, kind of encourage them to make sure that their schedules are good. And then also, if you just want to do something during the day, that's fine. But, you know, at this rate, you could, if you just wanted to rent a field for 2.5 hours, you could rent it for a day, and you take that field out of use for an entire day. You rented it for 2.5 hours, that's all you wanted. Now you've prohibited anybody else from using it. Well, that does occur. So we want to make sure that if you just want to use it for 2.5 hours, that's fine. We can charge you for that. But if if you want to block it out, it's going to cost you a little bit more. And then just what I mean by Class A, Class B, Class C. Class A is Lear Park, Spring Hill Park. Those are our Class A facilities. Class B facilities are McWhorter, Hinsley, Timpson, and then Class C is Stamper and Womack. So, and we did take a look at that, and we are proposing to reduce the hourly cost on renting those facilities, kept those the same. So we have taken a look at it overall. Another issue is inability to get fields for practice. And you're not going to get people to rent practice fields for $40 an hour. And so our fields will lay idle. I mean, because nobody's willing to pay that much to have a practice. So we've taken a look at a way that they could practice on our facilities during the week or whenever they're available when games aren't being scheduled at $15 an hour, which will increase our use, and which is what we all want, is people to use our fields, as long as it's not to the detriment of the field quality. So we've taken a look at having a facility use fee as on a practice standpoint. So it's much more reasonable, and so people could use our facilities. And basically what that is we're not going to line it, we're not going to put bases out. It's just a nice field for you to use. That way our costs really are negligible in that. You know, but when we offer a game field, bases are out, it's lined, it's prepped, it's good. Whereas practice, we may not, if we can't get around to it, we may not drag it that day. Most of the time we do anyway, because it just helps us maintain it better. But no promises, I guess, is the whole thing. So like I said, it's all about the money. For the most part, what we put in there, I think most people, I've talked to about half of them, and some of them don't like the fees necessarily, but it's all right.
That user groups you're talking about, you talked to?
Yes, sir.
Do they seem encouraged or discouraged, or can you gauge their response?
I think they have appreciated everything that's put in here and the thought and effort that's gone into it, and it's addressed many issues. It allows us a little bit more flexibility in working with them, those that we have good relationships with, which we have good relationships with all of them, but that's what it's about, is we have flexibility. We tried to define, you know, what color gray it was in the old one. I mean, it was, you know, well, if not this, this, and this not, if not that, then this, and it just got so onerous that people were like, I don't know what this means. And so we've tried to strip it down and just say, we're going to make a decision on what is best and right for the city of Longview. And when somebody says, well, who is that? Ultimately, I guess that's me. And you know, hopefully everybody has a little bit of faith in me. But again, it's about the relationship and working with these people. We've reached out to them, and I can't tell you how many comments I've had that, you know, people are just thankful for me and our staff reaching out to them to talk about these types of things. Yeah,
and I think that it's mutually beneficial to the users and to the people in the city to reduce that from 49 pages to 16. Easier to make decisions.
Yes, sir.
You can actually go through it.
You call Stamper a Class C park. Is there a way for a park to be improved, to improve their classification from a C to a B?
Yeah, we'd have to put a considerable amount of capital investment into it, making sure that the fence and the field conditions are there. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Is that on the field use guidelines?
I think that's it.
Thank you. And that's going to be an action item at the next meeting?
Yes, sir. I propose that it is.
Okay. And by the way, that reminds me, I don't know if I thanked you for sending the materials ahead of time. Very useful. And we thank you for doing that.
Sure.
Because there's sometimes a lot of it, and it gives us a chance to actually read it.
Yeah. every time there's
The
a
next item is Hinsley Park. Would you like to take any type of break, Scott? Are you good to keep going? Okay.
I'm all good.
Floor is yours.
Hinsley Park, residents will have the opportunity to vote for or against removing the park designation from Hinsley Park, thus authorizing the sale of said land or its use for other purposes. And early voting is occurring right now and will continue through October 30th. The election day is November 3rd. And I would encourage everybody to get as much information as they can about it. We do have it on our educational information on the city's website at longviewtexas.gov/Hinsley. And I don't really have any other update other than that. Voting is occurring and will continue through Friday. And if you have any questions about anything, I'd be happy to answer it. But that's the extent of what I have at this point. We'll know on November 4th what is occurring out there based on what the residents say.
You want to talk about Hinsley Park, Kenny? We'll go to the next item, item 8, board comments and questions. And so I'll ask y'all first what y'all have for Scott or any of these gentlemen. And gentlemen, over on this side too. No? I had just a couple of, these are not big. What was that item you had? I think it was in your report, November 15th, public event at the Arboretum,
Yes, sir.
3 to 5 p.m. What is that?
It's tentatively being called Walk in the Park, and it's to re-engage the community on what is occurring or is planned to occur at the Arboretum itself. And so it will be at Mog Cobb, out in, where the Arboretum is. There's been a lot of work that has been done primarily by Gregg County, but also Public Works Department has had a great amount of assistance in doing some land clearing. So you kind of have a little bit of a vision of what the Arboretum will look like in the meadows and some of those types of things. And so it's just it's kind of an open house that'll have a couple of they're working with a couple of artists to be out there, but then also we're going to do some games and activities for some kids because, kids can't just sit still and look at pretty nature for more than 3 or 4 seconds.
Absolutely. You had on there, and this is something disc golfers have noticed a long time, that Rotary Park, that dolphin thing. It was painted by anonymous volunteers. How does that work? People just show up and start painting, and then they're gone, and you come across it and it's painted?
I can explain that. We had that.
Roving painters?
We had that scheduled to be repainted, along with our, we're repainting restrooms, and the guy we put in charge of that said, "Man, I'd like to paint those dolphins, but I'd like to get away from the blue and the gray." Right. And I said, "Man, just, be creative."
So it was a citizen?
Well, no, this was staff that was going to do that.
Oh.
And he was going to do it when he finished up painting the park restrooms, and he's a crew leader in my department, and one of the people that works for him was out there that morning cleaning up the pavilion and restroom and getting things ready for the day, and then she left, and he goes out there, he's thinking about, looking it over, and shows up, and it's painted. Somebody showed up and painted it.
So there were some roving painters
and painted it different colors, and of course they signed it, but you can't really, how artist signature, you can't really read it, but yeah, the 2 or 3 people showed up. I think somebody went by during the day and they were there painting, and by the time it got reported and then we went out, it was done. And they did a really, really good job. Really creative in the colors they chose, and they look
That's
really
excellent.
nice.
It's probably better than the gray or,
That
or
thing
blue that we
bad
would have
for a
painted
long
it.
time. There was some sort of, I don't know, it was a leak or a drainage problem there below that, on the lower side of that pool. Do you know if that's been resolved?
Yes, that's our drainage department and public works took care of that probably 18 months ago.
Yeah.
Put a new collector basin in, took care of it.
Excellent.
While Kirk brings that up, do we know, do they use the right materials to where it has some sustaining ability to it, or is it something that's gonna have to go back and be retouched on a more frequent basis?
You talking about,
The painting.
well, we typically paint that once a year. By the time you turn the water on and it runs all the time, it's not on and off like a splash pad.
Mhm.
That's been there for a long time, and by the time it goes through the 4 seasons, being wet except for the coldest part of wintertime, every year to 18 months we have to repaint it anyway.
So since this was an anonymous thing, are we going to open it up for quote-unquote bids over the next few years? For people to come in and say that they'd like to?
Well, I'm just gonna thank the guys that did it.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens next fall. I didn't have any plan to have, recruit people to paint it or whatever. I was just surprised and shocked, and apparently the folks that did that have some of themselves invested in the community over there, and I'm just thankful they did it. I thought it was great. We'll see what comes of it in the future.
I can't speak for everybody else, but I think it's phenomenal. It looks wonderful out there.
Yes.
I need to go look at it. I was encouraged in your report that advanced belly dancing participation has not declined.
That's
Whatever
right.
you're doing, you're
Stayed the
doing
same.
something right.
Hey, got a good instructor.
So, board members, do y'all have anything else that y'all would like to talk about or any other questions? Scott, would you anything else? Thank
all I
y'all
had.
for coming. This meeting is adjourned. Appreciate you.